Hey guys, greetings. It's Irish and the gang. We're gonna do another LDC now, but I think we're gonna call it something different, like GNU News or Tux Topics or something like that. If you guys have a preference on what we call this instead of LDC now, then put your suggestions down below. But obviously this is going to be about the Unity. So, holy cow, did that was a huge bombshell. What did you guys think of this? Yeah, so
Pretty much covers it, yeah.
Pretty
so
big explosion there.
yeah, so if you guys have been living under a rock for the last week, Ubuntu, Mark Shuttleworth has announced that they are not going to do any phone development or Unity. So with this latest Unity 8, they're going to be switching back to GNOME 3 on Ubuntu 18.04 LTS. So, do you guys think that and like it was an internal thing, or do you think like all the backlash that the Linux community has given them since their switch to Unity, or what do you think caused this big decision?
I really don't think it had.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, C. Smith.
Yeah, I honestly think it's a little bit of bold. A, they were shoveling money into basically a black hole, and B, it just wasn't all as popular as they thought it would be.
I find a lot of times, though, that companies don't care about the popularity of what they're building. And I kind of got the impression from Shuttleworth that he really didn't care that there was a large part of the community that really hated and despised Unity. I also feel that for every person who didn't like it, there's still somebody out there who did really like it. I mean, for the reasons why I don't like Unity, it mainly had to do with having control over my desktop environment, being able to manipulate and set up the environment that I wanted, that with Unity pretty much stripped away a lot of those abilities. So I'm happy it's gone. I'm happy that they're going back to GNOME, because when it first came out, I really thought Unity was nothing more than just a stripped down, watered down version of GNOME, and thought, why? Why reinvent this wheel?
Yeah, it had a lot of base and no, but it changed everything. It had the same, it had GTK, but it used a lot of GNOME's features, but it just completely different than what GNOME did. And I mean, I didn't like it so much myself. I mean, it's really hard for me to say I particularly dislike a desktop environment, but I didn't like Unity that much. But there's always the non-vocal opinion that there were a lot of people that were using Unity, kind of what I call the defaulters, where they got in it, they said, okay, this is default, I don't see any reason to change it, so on and so forth.
Yeah. So with this, with the announcement, in recent years they started developing Mir. So with Mir, if anyone doesn't know, it's a display server to replace X on their end. So they decided to invent a completely new display server to replace the Xorg Windows server, since Xorg is what, like 30 years old now, if not more. So it doesn't specifically say this, but do you think Mir is dead also?
Oh,
I
yeah,
honestly
it'll have to
don't.
be.
Yeah, I honestly don't see them continuing it with no use for it after this.
Yeah, because they basically made May just purely as an Ubuntu thing. Well, an Ubuntu and Unity thing, really, didn't they? And so I don't see any reason for them to continue it, because I mean, it's not like anyone else was using it.
Yeah, so because I think Mir wasn't it part of their whole convergence strategy. Like they're
Yeah.
gonna try to put Ubuntu Unity on the phone, so all you would have to do is plug your phone in, and hey, it's your own computer. So I
Yeah.
think because they're stopping with the phone, that it's there's no point unless the community is going to. With that, do you think there's enough people out there that some, like a group of people in the Ubuntu or in general, will take up the mantle and start making Unity better after 1804.
I really think that somebody will step up to the plate with that because while there are a lot of people complaining about Unity, like I said, there's a lot of people who love it, and there's going to be people who want it to continue to strive. Now, one thing I am kind of sad about is I really like the idea of Ubuntu going with an OS on a phone, and I really feel like the phone technology now is getting superb. When you can have phones that have more memory than some computers with these new SSDs that are coming out with 128, 256 gigs of space, it begs to ask the question that yes, you could have a phone/computer combo, and I really wish that they weren't getting rid of that part of this.
Yeah, I mean that was that was kind of the whole point of the Ubuntu on phones. That's why they originally did that. The Ubuntu Edge, or they tried anyway, because they wanted to make a phone that was powerful enough to run as a desktop. Because at the time there weren't that many of them. Obviously now there's quite a lot more, but
Now, Eku, didn't you tell me in the pre-show that someone decided to take up and starting to develop Ubuntu Touch again?
yeah, they're called UB ports. Basically they're the guys who do all the unofficial Ubuntu Touch ports to all like these devices that Canonical don't officially support. Apparently, I can't remember where I read it, so I don't really have a source, but they did say they do plan to kind of take up development of Ubuntu Touch as kind of a community, kind of like what they did when, well, they didn't, but when Mozilla ditched Firefox OS, they handed it off to the community, and the community kind of took it on a little bit further, and so that is the plan anyway. I don't know how well it's going to go, because as far as I know, they're not a gigantic team, but good luck to them, I suppose.
By the way, to add into that too, Android N, when we're talking about the convergence option of using a phone as a desktop, the latest version of Android Nougat, has the capability to actually do that with a freeform window mode on there. Not sure how long that's going to stick around or what the use of that is, but they actually have it where you can plug it into a display using HDMI or whatnot, and use a keyboard and mouse with it and have a completely freeform window mode. So that's kind of a big thing since Android has picked that up and started doing that. That kind of hurts as it degrades the selling point of Ubuntu of the touch interface, because they now have their competitor who already has a massive adoption rate already supports that function as well.
Wasn't there a while ago? Someone made a desktop version of Android that had these floating windows on it? I can't remember what it was called, but they made it for like netbooks and that kind of thing. And the idea of it was Android, but it had an actual, floating windows that you could drag around and stuff. I can't remember what it was called. Do you know that?
I don't know, but I
Remix.
Yeah, Remix.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna have to talk about the unfortunate news with this bombshell that there's going to be some job loss. Now, to me, I don't think there should be any type of job loss, but the article that is on screen on OMG Ubuntu states that in certain departments there could be as high as 60% job loss. And I don't know if I completely agree. Do you think it's Canonical themselves or the developers of the Unity UI that are saying, no, I don't want to go work on GNOME or Wayland?
Well, the biggest thing out of any of this. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's probably a bit of both. I mean, I can't imagine that every single one of them said, I don't want to work on GNOME. I bet there were some people there who said, yeah, I'll be happy to try and kind of, implement a good GNOME setup on Ubuntu. But at the same time, I'm sure Canonical must have said, we hired you specifically for your phone expertise, and so you're no longer required.
Yeah, the biggest thing to look at here is also the profitability of it, because Canonical is a company and they're working with open source technology, which makes the margins for them much smaller than most other technology companies on there. And actually, in that article, if you look down at the bottom there, it says it made an operating loss of 3.3 million pounds last year. So it's natural for them to kind of go through and cut all of those areas where they're losing profit in, where they're not making any money, because that margin is so small. They have to act like that. They have to be aggressive about that stuff to keep the company basically in business.
Yeah, definitely.
That begs the question then, was this more of a financial move instead of just a, hey, people don't like my OS or my desktop manager, so we're going to change? This might be more, we need to slim down the company, we need to make ourselves more profitable. Unity could go into, we're using GNOME instead, and we could still implement some of our features from Unity into our version of GNOME instead of having this unique desktop manager.
Yeah.
So-
You can also look at another great example of the similar idea with it being a financial cut is actually looking at Intel, because Intel over the last year actually sliced a whole bunch of their company up. They've lost their it pretty much lost most of their GPU development team. They cut that department down and all that stuff because of the whole technology world right now. The margins are getting smaller and smaller and smaller as we go along.
So again, switching subjects a little. So since they're not going to be developing Unity or concentrating on the mobile world, they're going to be working on the IoT and cloud, which when I read that, it was confusing because didn't they have Ubuntu One, which was their cloud provider, and if you that anyone could use. So why would they go back to? Why wouldn't they
I
keep
don't think that's
developing
quite what they mean.
Ubuntu One?
They're technically not going back. They're concentrating on making it a back-end operating system rather than a service. Like, they have Ubuntu for cloud, which is just an operating system meant to be run in the cloud, and Ubuntu One was just cloud storage and a music store.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much thought, I don't think it was anything to do with Ubuntu One when they mentioned cloud. I thought it was, as you said, making Ubuntu better as a system for running, cloud services on. And so I'd imagine there's hundreds and thousands, maybe millions of companies who are running software, cloud software, as you'd say, and I bet most of them are running on top of Ubuntu anyway. And so obviously Ubuntu know that's where the money is, that's where everybody is who's using the system.
Now,
Yeah,
since-
they've got OpenStack and Docker,
Yeah.
I believe, are their two big things they put into Ubuntu Cloud.
And Juju as well, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Do they still use Juju?
I think so.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember mentioning it ages ago, but I can't remember if they still use it or not. I imagine they do because it seemed quite popular.
Now, since the world is moving towards IoT, do you think, because in a recent thing with Brian Lunduk, who used to be a host of a Linux Action Show, he thinks that Ubuntu will do IoT for like a year or two and then just give up because it's not profitable. Do you think that with the IoT, they'll make more of a name for themselves in that field since that's where the world is coming to?
Again, I'm pretty sure quite a lot of IoT stuff is probably already running some kind of Ubuntu, maybe a very stripped down version. So again, I think they're seeing where the customers already are and thinking that's where we need to go, Because I mean, there's all sorts, you see it all the time, don't you? You see it on the news, some guy built some weird, creepy spider robot that's running Ubuntu on its little machine that's inside it or something.
Yeah, I think they definitely need to have a presence in that market. I don't think it would be a good idea for them to just drop it entirely.
Yeah, definitely. And things like, isn't it Nest? Isn't that already kind of Linux-based anyway? And that's a massive one at the moment.
Yeah, most of those, like you're talking about home automation stuff.
Yeah.
Is that what? Okay, yeah. Most of those are Linux. In fact, I would say probably about 98% of them are.
Yeah, I mean, it might not necessarily be Ubuntu at the moment. It might just be some kind of custom stripped down Linux or something along those lines, something like you'd run on Arduinos and that kind of thing. But Ubuntu are seeing that as a target and thinking, maybe they're not running Ubuntu right now, but they're definitely running Linux. And so maybe we should target them to try and get them to switch over to us. With that isn't that what they're keeping Snappy Core for as well? That's an IoT thing, isn't it?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Now, do you guys think that there'll be a Raspberry Pi version of Ubuntu now that they've gotten rid of
There already is
Unity?
one.
Yeah,
there?
there's
Okay.
yeah, there is. You have the Snappy Core version, which is their cloud, basically their IoT cloud version, and then now they've started building normal ARM server versions and desktops because you've got the Ubuntu Mate project does a desktop version for Raspberry Pi as well.
And apparently that's brilliant, but I've never tried it.
No, I'm glad
Yeah.
you actually brought up Mate because it's interesting that Ubuntu is gonna swallow the GNOME edition of Ubuntu. Why wouldn't they want to go back to like Mate or anything? Or go to Mate, I'm sorry.
Here's how I see it. It's usually the new shiny that tends to drive new users. Usually.
I just think like GNOME 3 anyway is basically kind of trying to be the de facto Linux desktop, whereas Mate it's a bit it's brilliant and I have nothing against it, but it is a little bit of a niche for those people who want the GNOME 2 experience, whereas GNOME 3 is just kind of the kind of Linux desktop, really, isn't it? And that's kind of what they're trying to push themselves as. So I suppose it'd make sense for Ubuntu to keep on that track, really.
Yeah, not to insult anybody that uses Mate, but or Mate, however we want to pronounce it. But if it were me under that circumstance, I would look at it and say, okay, we need to pick a project that's moving forward instead of a project that's trying to emulate a past experience.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, Mate, they do a load of work to try and keep it modern, don't they? I mean, they ported it to GTK 3. I mean, they've done all sorts of things like that to try and keep it up to date, as you'd say. But it is still that old school experience, isn't it?
Right. In fact, Mate was something that I worked with when I saw GNOME go from 2 to 3, and I went, "Oh my goodness, what's going on here?" And I really liked Mate a lot, but one must realize eventually you must move on to the latest and greatest because developers can't keep developing for the older style, older library sets. And I'm really glad Mate is now going to the GDK3 and that library, and their look and interface is quite nice, but it is still that retro look. And we just need something, and I think this is a good move to continue with the GNOME 3 because they are the forefront. They are what everything is going to, even if we want to use that dirty word Windows and what they're doing with Windows 10, etc. I think that's the best thing was GNOME because they've always been on the GDK side, not the Qt with KDE, for instance.
Okay, so with as you said, trying to develop like the next greatest thing. So with them moving over to the GNOME project and now probably Wayland, do you think that Wayland will get a boost and be more, baked and now quicker than it would have been if they didn't do this?
I would definitely say so because Canonical is a huge driving force when it comes to rallying other developers behind a project. Especially when you look at third-party companies that, because Canonical deals a lot with, as we all know, they dealt with like Valve to bring in Steam and whatnot into the Linux ecosystem. And I think they're going to be a huge driving force, which is going to help push Wayland into a much better, earlier adoption than what most people would have expected it to be.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what they're going for is obviously they are going to be going in that direction now, really, aren't they? And so that is definitely going to be pushing it kind of down the pipe a little bit quicker than maybe we'd expected with just kind of Fedora on the back end of it. I mean, Fedora are big and everything, but they're nowhere near as big as Ubuntu, are they? So.
Okay, well, we're coming on like about 20 minutes, so is there anything else you guys want to talk about this huge announcement?
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping. I mean, I don't obviously none of us know any details just yet, but I'm hoping that they might maybe not necessarily just push a stock kind of GNOME experience. I'm hoping they might customize it a little bit, just to differentiate it a little bit from Fedora and everything like that. I know some places have said that it will just be a default, like the default GNOME, but I'll be quite interested to see if they do add any kind of extensions in there. Maybe if they do change a couple of things up a little bit just to make it a little bit more Ubuntu rather than just a stock.
I'm hoping
Yeah.
the same thing there, but I'm also hoping that they don't take GNOME and then lock it down and make it this elementary version of it, where they
doubt
have
they do
the
that.
same lack of features as Unity did. Because that goes back to why I didn't like Unity and the fact that Unity was just, it was great for the beginner, it was good, but what do you do when you're ready to move on and you're ready for that more advanced look and feel to be able to have more control over your system? You can't enable features within Unity to allow that better interface.
You open the config settings and start using your wobbly windows in your cube.
Yeah, all the GTK editors and stuff like that. Yeah.
Nah, just the config config editor.
Oh
The,
yeah, yeah, that too.
CCFM.
But there was a lot of stuff with Unity early on. You had to do with just like the GTK config
The
or the
Gcom stuff.
Yep.
I'm honestly just hoping they submit patches upstream. But yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
knowing how Canonical's been recently, it's kind of a long shot.
Yeah, but maybe that's it. I mean, they've ditched Upstart for System D. They're ditching Mir and Unity 8 for GNOME and Wayland. Maybe this is kind of a new thing. Maybe they're going to be starting to work a little bit better with the kind of other projects. Never know, do you? Until we see.
Yeah, have a good point.
Alrighty, I think we discussed it enough. Obviously this has been a huge story, so if you guys want any information, the links that I was showing earlier, I'll put down in the description below. And I'm sure if you just type in Ubuntu Unity, I'm sure you're going to find a bucket load more. So since we're on the end, we had 2 new people since last week. So Azure, would you want to explain how you got into Linux and what you're using now?
Yeah, sure. Hey, my name's Azure. I've been using Linux for a very long time. I think I started at like 2002 or 2003. I kind of an oddball when it comes to dealing with a lot of people because they always talk about how Ubuntu was their first operating system. And I started the year that Ubuntu actually first came out, and so actually before it. But I'm a distro hopper, so I've used a bunch of, I've used pretty much every major distribution. The only one I haven't spent a lot of time is in Gentoo. But yeah, I do all kinds of stuff with Linux and use it as a normal desktop system all day long. So
Awesome. And what distro are you on currently?
currently on Fedora, but as anything else, that's always able. I can always change that, you know.
All right. And then Das Grega, how did you get started and what distro are you on?
I got started back in the late 90s with Caldera. That was a disk that I had found at a computer show. And so that was my first introduction. I went to Red Hat for a little bit, tried Mandrake. I then found back in the early 2000s the best thing that I liked at the time was SUSE. And since it was German and I'd spent so many years over in Germany, I really liked supporting it. And I pretty much did on the server end for a while. In 2003 or so, I finally successfully installed Gentoo, and that's when I fell in love with Gentoo, and I've been using it ever since. And that's been my main desktop for all that time, from the KDE 2.x days all the way up into Plasma 5. Of course, now I'm using i3. That's my current, of course, right now.
Awesome. So if you guys have any suggestions for new topics, I swear it's not going to be another Ubuntu episode next time. So if you guys want to
Episode
hear,
3, Ubuntu Snappy.
that's right. So if you guys want to hear anything, any other aspect of the Linux world, like window managers versus desktop environments, I think we could probably get a good discussion on that for sure. But Das, why don't you lead us out?
If it's morning, evening, noon, or night, whatever you're having, have a good one. Bye, guys.